Hello class, it's Professor Al, and this is the video lesson that I promised you. So what we've done in class is we built one of our scenes that actually had a number of different objects on it, and we also built a second scene that actually had some animation on it with an action script. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and go through all the steps that I did with creating a scene that had an action script in it, and it had a stop action script and it had a button action script. So I'm starting off right now. I've got a scene number 1 that I'm seeing here, but I know that I have a second scene. So the way I'm going to find that is I'm going to go up to my window, scroll down all the way down the list until I come to scene. When I click on scene, it's going to open up the scene palette. And if you remember from class, we had an about scene, which basically just had our little mountain there, had a button in the sky that went across, and then I had another one which was called scene 1. That was the one that we started with. So I'm going to create a third scene at this point. Now think about a scene almost like a slide in your PowerPoint, or a screen. We'd call them screens in your PowerPoint. So I'm going to create another screen at this point, and this one's going to be a little bit different because I'm going to start to move away from just creating shapes to now creating e-learning. And that's the critical part, because this class is all about the e-learning. It's not just about the shapes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new scene. And so I'm going to click on my little bent over piece of paper in the bottom of the corner that creates a new scene. Okay, and I'm going to call this one intro. And I'm just going to do this all lowercase. The lowercase has got the advantage is that you don't have to guess whether it's uppercase or lowercase if you make it all lowercase. Okay, so I'm in intro. I create a new scene. It's completely blank. Okay, I've got one layer at the bottom of this, and down here on my timeline, I'm actually going to change that name. I'm going to call it BKG for background. Okay, and for our particular case here, we're going to put a couple things on a background because we're going to start to make it look much more like a program rather than just a series of shapes. So to do that, I'm going to make actually some basic design decisions. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go through and I'm going to take and put a bottom area which will be indicating where I'm going to have my navigational buttons. So I've clicked on my square. I'm going to choose a color, and it doesn't matter what color I choose, but I'm going to choose green for my situation. And I'm just going to draw this box across the bottom here. And this box on the bottom, it's just basically a shape, and I can manipulate it by clicking on my selection tool and clicking on it. So if I single click, I'm clicking on the fill, and if I double click on it, I'm clicking on the fill and the stroke. But basically, I've just drawn this square, and all it is just a visual separator. That's its whole job, is to basically make it so that I've got a spot that I can put my buttons on, and I can put it on there consistently. Now, the other thing I'm going to do at the same time is I'm going to basically create an area across the top that I'm going to treat for my user orientation. So I'm going to create another box up there, click on my little box tool, and I'll draw my box across the top. And I'm going to make this one a little bit bigger because I'm going to have a little more information in it. But at this point, all I have is I've just got basically two boxes, and they're on the background. Now, I want to make sure that I can take and add things to this, and it won't change these items. If I click around and start adding screens and adding images and stuff, the challenge is that I might accidentally move these two shapes. Well, I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is down here on my timeline, I'm going to click on the little padlock. And what that does is that locks it. So no matter how much I click on it, it's not going to move what's there in the background. Okay, that background is locked. But I'm going to create another scene. Okay, so I'm going to click on a new layer. And this layer is actually going to be my text layer. So this is about instruction, so I need to put in there some text. And so I'm actually going to take, and I've just typed it text over my side list of items. I've got one that's called the text tool. If I click on that, you'll notice your properties window changes right away. It's going to remember the fill color I had. Well, I want to make my fill color actually be black so it stands out. Okay, and I can choose all kinds of different things from the size to all different items over here on the side menu. But I'm going to go over and I'm going to click on my stage and I'm going to type. So I'm going to say this instruction is about Flash. Okay, so I've typed that text in there. And you'll notice when I typed that text, it actually had a little shape to it. It actually had a square. So if I click on this, you'll notice it has a square that I typed in the text, but up here in the corner, it's got a little circle. Well, that little circle, if I would have kept on typing with it, notice that it doesn't wrap it around to the next line down. It just keeps on going. Well, that circle I can actually force it to wrap if I grab that little square over in the corner and I push it in. So as soon as I make any kind of change, or push it in, pull it out, whatever, as soon as I make any change to it, it actually moves from a circle to be a square. And now if I type anything new in there, it's going to basically, when it comes to the end of that line, it wraps it down the next line. Okay, so when you're going to be adding your text for your instruction, realize the fact that you're going to have text that's on the screen. You'll need to choose your text tool, but you also need to figure out how big of a space that you need to allocate for it, or how big it needs to be. Okay, so this instruction is about Flash. That is actually what I've made for the landing screen, okay, or the intro screen. This is what any user, when they come in and first start my program, this is what they're going to see first. Okay, and then I'm going to put a little item on there. I'm going to start to add some buttons. So I basically have a little text on there, and I'm going to add a button. So if you remember from class, we create a button by going into our library of shapes, and I'm going to actually put this on its own layer. Okay, so I've got a background layer, a text layer, and we're going to create another layer, and I'm going to call this one button, but I'm going to call this one next button. Okay, so BTN-NXT, that tells me that it's button next. And I can put an EXT, it doesn't matter. I'm just trying to keep it short. Okay, so I've got my button next. On that layer, I'm actually going to draw a shape, and that's where I'm going to put my button. All right, so I'm going to click on my rectangle. I'm going to choose my color palette in my can here for filling in the color. Okay, and I'm going to drag it out, and I look at it and go, well, you know what? I don't want to have something black. I think I'm going to change it. So I'm going to select it. And then once I've selected it, I'm going to click in here to the, I got to click off of it again, click on it again, and I'm going to click on my little bucket, and I'm going to change the color. And since this one is going to be bright, I'm going to make that bright yellow with a black stroke around it. And I'm going to click off of it, and now I'm going to take and I'm going to move this down here to the bottom. But I'm going to do a couple more things. I'm going to resize it. So I clicked on my free transform tool. I moved that up to there. And now what I want to do, I've got this shape on there, but I need to convert it over to a symbol, because you can only add action scripts to a symbol. All right, so I'm going to grab my shape here, and I'm going to go up to my top, and I'm going to choose convert to symbol. When I choose convert to symbol, it's going to give me what do I want to do with it. I have a number of different options. So at this point, I'm trying to figure out what I want to create it. Well, I'm going to create it as a button. So I'm going to go in here to my text. I'm going to put in there BTN-NEXT. And I'm going to click on OK. So now, over my library, I know that I've got one that's called Button Next. All right. And you'll notice I've got my other buttons in there too. So anywhere you create your symbols and they appear in the library from any one of the scenes, they're all going to appear in here. So just realize that if you call something button next in one, it's going to carry that throughout the rest of them. That just means that I can create this in my library one spot and reuse it in any of my other scenes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that button next that I have. I'm going to go back to my properties because it's really important that I'm in my properties area. And I'm actually going to just drag this down here to the bottom so that I have a spot for it. But if I look at this, it actually doesn't have any text on it. It doesn't tell me that it's next. So what I want to do is I want to modify this button. And the way that I can modify any symbol is by double-clicking on it. If I double-click on it, now I've moved away from the scene and I'm now into the button edit area. Now, I've done that button edit area, and I look at my scene, but I also look down here at my timeline and notice that I've got a couple of different things going on. I actually have a whole new timeline just available for just this button. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take and put a couple elements inside of this button timeline. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a background. So I'm going to call this BKG. It's the background for that button, and it's got that yellow with a black border behind it. Okay, and I need to create a text layer on this, so I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to call that one next. Or actually, I'm going to call that one button text, btn-txt. And that's just basically going to be my button text, the text I'm going to put on my button. And so on my up layer, which is basically buttons have got actually four states, but we really only see three of them. The up state, which is one that no one, if you haven't clicked on a button, that's the up state. So let's take and put some text on here. So I'm going to go over my text tool, and I'm going to choose my color. I want to make sure my color is black so it stands out. I want high contrast here. And I'm going to click on my screen and type in there next. And I go, well, that's a little bit big for what I need, so I'm going to shrink it down a little bit. All right, so I think its good side is probably 12. All right, and I'm going to click on my black selection tool, drag it over, and drag it to the center. Now you'll notice it's jumping all over the place. It's kind of hard to drag it. It kind of bounces around, but I dropped it on the screen. Then I'm using my arrows to move it down 1 pixel at a time, because I can actually do that. If you use your up and down arrows on your keyboard, you can actually move it 1 pixel at a time. So right now I've got my next button, and my next button basically it's just a yellow background with the word next on it. But when I go and look at it as a button itself in the scene, if I go back to my scene, okay, and if I go and I play it, so if I go up to my controls, and actually am I in my scene here? Yes, I am. Okay, and if I go to my controls and I choose test, it may not get me all this direction. Oh, I realize one thing I need to do. I need to go back to my Flash, and I need to get make sure that this scene intro is at the top of the list, because in my scenes it's going to take and choose whichever scene that I have and run through them. Okay, so it's going to say whatever's first, that's going to run first. So I'm going to click on my little intro here and drag it up above the about, and now it's going to have intro first, and then it'll go to about, and then it'll go to scene 1. So whichever order you set these different items in here on the scene, that is the order in which they will play. So right now I've got myself my background on there. I've got my little next button, but I just realized that, wow, you know what? If I play this right now, it's just going to play right through this really quickly, and it'll just blip and go on to the next scene. So I need to do something to stop this. So I'm on my screen right now. I'm on the stage, and I'm going, you know what? I want to take it, actually have this run. I'm going to have this run for 1 second. Okay, and then I'm going to pause it. So when I think about this, this actually has got a number of frames per second. So this particular stage that I'm on right here, okay, has got X number of frames per second. It actually has got 24 frames per second. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to make this simple for myself. I'm going to go at 25 frames. Okay, so the 25 frames is actually, for me, is going to be my point at which I have 1 minute or 1 second that's occurred. So I'm going to click on the 25. Okay, and I know that I've got frames per second because when I go over here to my properties, I see FPS, frames per second. Frames per second is 24. Well, I'm going to go to 25. That means in a second and 1 millisecond, it's actually going to be playing through. And I'm choosing 25 just because it's easy for me to remember. I can add them up, 25 and 25. Basically, that means that I've got 2 seconds. If I have 50, if I'm on frame 50, that means it's a 2 second. But I'm going to go out to my my scene here and go, okay, I need to have this run all the way out here to the frame 25. So I'm going to insert a keyframe, timeline keyframe. And you'll notice it carries this all the way out. And out here at 25, all it has is just the next button. Well, that means I need to do that with the other ones. So I'm going to go to my next one down, which is my text. And I'm going to go to that one. I'm going to choose Insert Timeline Keyframe. Okay, so now the instructions are there. Well, I still need one more thing. I need to still have my background. So I'm going to insert timeline keyframe, and it now makes it so that for the 25 frames of this, it actually has got the background, it's got the button on, it's got all the elements on it. Okay, so at this point, I'm out to 25, and I want to stop the motion here. I don't want to make it. I don't want it to go any further because I want to make it so that I can use my button to advance. So first thing I need to do is I need to put it a stop action script. So I'm going to go up to the top of my layers, create a whole new layer, and call it actions. Remember? So we did this in class. We have ACTIONS. I use all capitals so it stands out. Actions always needs to be the topmost layer. So I'm on frame 25. I'm actually going to click on frame 25. And if I right click on it, it gives me the option for actions. So I'm going to choose actions. I'm going to go up to my little thing up here that says code snippets, or if you remember in class, I called those the wickets. If you go to code snippets up here at the top, click on it and choose your actions. So we're going to choose action script, and we're going to choose timeline and stop at this frame. So we're going to double click on that, and it inserts that code here in the action script. It tells me actions on frame 25 is a stop at this frame. So now that I've got that on there, I can actually close this. So I'm going to close the little actions palette, and I'm going to close this little actions palette up here, the code snippets. And now I'm on the screen. And if I move my playhead back, here where the 25 is, I have a little letter A. That means that there's an action script there. So I'm going to test it. So I'm on frame 1. I'm going to go up to my controls, go down to test movie, test in browser. And if I play it, it should run and then stop right there on frame 25. And if I roll my cursor over it, I see that my finger changes to usually indicate that I've got a button there. However, there's nothing else happening. I get no other indication that this is a button. Usually when you roll over buttons inside of programs, they change color. So let's do something to change this symbol so this stands out and changes color. Okay, so I'm going to close down my browser. I'm just going to close that to make it so I'm not running all my applications. Okay, so I'm now back at my program, and I want to change this next button. So I'm going to double click on it. Okay, and I'm now into the button area. Okay, I'm no longer in the scene. I'm now in the button area. And so now I have the up state. I want to make it so that the over state changes color. But I'm not going to change the text. So if I'm not going to change the text or not change something, then I actually don't have to do a keyframe. I can just choose Insert Timeline Frame. If I do that, it carries whatever's on the previous frame over to this frame. Okay? Remember, keyframes are only points of change. So this has actually got nothing to do with point of change. Okay? So, oh gosh, I got all these emails opening up. Stop. Okay, so nothing else comes up with this, but I want to take and make it so that my background changes. So in my background, I'm not going to just insert a frame on this over. I'm going to insert a keyframe because I want it to be different than the frame before it. So if I insert a keyframe on there, okay, so if I click on that, choose Insert Timeline Keyframe, now this frame, okay, this frame that I have, I could actually change the color of it, and I'm going to do that. So I'm going to click in the center of my fill color, choose that, and I'm going to make it so it's red, so it stands out, and I'm going to click off of it. Okay, so at this point, if I move my playhead back, in the up state, it basically is yellow. In the over state, it is red. Now, we don't have to hit the down state or the hit state. So the down state is actually just occurs when you click on the button, and if you leave your cursor pressed down, then it'll actually be a different color or a different look. We really only need to set our up state and our over state, and that's all we're going to focus on for our class. I want you to go back, and we're going to click back on the intro scene. And now, if I roll my cursor over this when I test this, you'll see a difference. Okay, so I'm going to go up here to my controls, test movie, I'm going to test in the browser. Comes up, and watch what happens when I roll my cursor over it. It rolls over, it says, hey, that's a button. I'm going to give you a visual indicator that that's a button. Okay, and all I did to do that was basically add an overstate for the button, not just having it as a button symbol. I actually created another another frame for that. Okay, so now I have those two things, but I don't have it working yet. Nothing's functioning at this point. Okay, it is literally just a graphic. It is a symbol that is a button, but it's not a working symbol. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I click on that scene, but I go, wait a second, you know what? This next button is going to display, but it really only works on frame 25 when I stop it. So I'm going to click on the 25 frame for the button, which actually puts a little blue line around this. And now I'm going to basically open up my actions. So I'm going to right click on it, choose actions. It's going to say it's on button next 25. And I'm going to do the same thing, code snippets, action script, timeline. But in this time, I'm not really trying to stop the frame. I'm trying to go to a scene and play. Now, there is a number of different options here. You could go to a frame and play, or you can go to a scene and play. We're going to choose go to a scene and play because we're going to really use the scenes as, in a sense, our slides or screens that we're going to jump from one to the other. So I'm going to double click on go to scene and play. Requires an instance name. Oh, I forgot to give it an instance name. I got to go back to the button and give it an instance name. So I'm going to close this down. I'm going to close down my action script, go back to my button, click on it, and up here at the top, I forgot to put my instance name in there. So I'm going to call this one BTN, and then I'm going to put in there go to, and I'm going to put in there about scene. And remember, you can't use any special characters in here. You could use uppercase and lowercase, but I'm putting them all together. Okay, so I have that in there. So now I've got an instance name for that. And now I'm going to go and I'm going to add the action script. So I'm going to right click on it. Go to my actions. Go to my code snippets, my action script, my timeline navigation. I'm going to go to this scene and play, double click on it. Notice it fills in all the details, but the ones that are most important to us actually exist here at the end. So you say it says go to movie clip this fruit and play. Well, we can play frame number 1. That's what this first one is frame, but we're not going to go to scene 3. We are going to go to the about scene. Okay, so we're going to choose about because that is the next scene in our little program. And we're going to close that one down. And we're going to close down our code snippets. And now we're back at our movie. And let's test that thing out. So we're going to go up to Control, Test Movie, Test in Browser. It's going to come up. It's going to stop. It's waiting for me to do something. If I click on the next, it's going to actually go to whatever the next scene is. Oh, maybe I don't have one. Maybe I didn't spell it correctly. And that is a challenge. You have to make sure you spell everything correctly. So I'm going to open up my scene here. Get back to my Flash. I used a capital A for about, so that's really important. I'm going to have to go back to my script, open up my actions. This is why, like I said, it is very, very picky. So it's looking for you to have inside of there what the actual action is. And sometimes it's easier just to delete it. I'm actually going to do a little trick here over here in the actions that lists out all the actions. So I'm at frame 25. I got a couple things in here. When I click on that, it says up, go to and play, and I have a lowercase a. I need to make that an uppercase A for about. And I'm going to close it. And now I'm going to test it out. So let's see what happens now. So I'm going to go up here. I'm going to actually save my file because I've been playing it. Save as. And this one is class 1. And this one is GoToScene. And that's what I'm basically calling this one because we were adding the GoToScene. Okay. GoToScene. And I'm going to download that to my downloads folder. And I'll add that into the course. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to test it. So Control, Test Movie, Test the Flash Player. Click on it. Now it goes to my next scene. Now, we don't know that this is the About scene. We know this only because we click on the one that says About over here. So maybe we should do something with our user orientation so we know what scene we're on. So right now, I know that in my background it's green. I know that I've got text on there. Well, I need to create a different kind of text. I want to call this text user orientation. User orientation is basically a place where that's where the user goes to know where they are. So I create a new layer. I'm going to call this one user O for user orientation. And now on that layer, I'm going to now go and click on my text box, type up here at the top, introduction. Okay, so now I know that I'm on the introduction slide or intro. Okay, and say for the next scene I want to take and put whatever that scene is in the exact same spot. So instead I'm going to make it a little bit, I'm going to make it black so it stands out a little bit. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so you can see it a little bit more. Okay, but I want to make it so that that word intro goes to the exact same spot on the next screen, on the next scene. So I'm going to click on it, choose copy, and now I'm going to go over to my about scene and I'm going to choose edit. And I've got a couple. I've got paste in center or paste in place. I want to choose paste in place. If I do that, it's going to paste in the exact same spot as the other one. And now this one is not the introduction, it's actually the about. And if I go to that screen, if I click on the select tool to jump off of it, now I know that that one's the about. And if I go to my scene one, and if I do edit, I make sure I click on it, I got to have a spot to do it. Okay, so right now I don't have any user orientation there. Need to create a layer for user orientation. So user O, and I'm going to now go and I'm going to paste it. So edit, paste in place. Now it puts it up here at the top. And this one I actually could call scene and space and one. Okay, so now I actually have got on top of each one of my scenes a way of telling what scene I'm in. So right now I'm in intro. If I go up here to the top and if I choose window and I go and I test it, test movie in browser, it's going to come up. If I click on my next button, it's going to jump over to the about scene. So I now that I know I'm there, and if I click on the next one, it takes me to scene. So what I'm doing at this point is I've tested out each one of the scenes and I also know what I've labeled. So that's what we're going to basically be doing with your project. So I'm going to stop the recording.